Good. All right. So just a little spiel for the YouTube video people. So James Joyce readers, today, August 31st, 2023, we're continuing with the Nausicaa episode. And this to me is one of the greatest analyses of consumer culture ever, and how consumer culture can capture a person's mind. So there's my grandiose. You have to forgive me, I was a sociology major, so I tend to make grandiose statements like this every once in a while. With that out of the way, I will continue with the reading. And while Edie Boardman was with little Tommy behind the push cart, she was just thinking, would the day ever come when she could call herself his little wife-to-be? Then they could talk about her till they went blue in the face. Bertha Supple, too, and Edie, the Spitfire, because she would be 22 in November. She would care for him with creature comforts, too, for Gertie was womanly wise and knew that a mere man liked that feeling of hominess. Her griddle cakes done to a golden brown hue, and Queen Anne's pudding of delightful creaminess had won golden opinions from all, because she had a lucky hand also for lighting a fire, dredge in the fine self-raising flour, and always stir in the same direction, then cream the milk and sugar and whisk well the white of eggs, though she didn't like the eating part when there were any people that made her shy. And often she wondered why you couldn't eat something poetical, like violets or roses. And they would have a beautifully appointed drawing room with pictures and engravings and photographs of Grandpa Giltrap's lovely dog, Gary Owen, that almost talked. It was so human. And chintz covers for the chairs, and that silver toast rack in Clary's summer jumbo sale like they have in rich houses. He would be tall, with broad shoulders. She always admired tall men for a husband, with glistening white teeth under his carefully trimmed, sweeping mustache, and they would go on the continent for their honeymoon 3 wonderful weeks. And then, when they settled down in a nice, snug, and cozy little homely house, every morning they would both have brekkie, simple but perfectly served, for their own 2 selves. And before he went out to business, he would give his dear little wifey a good hearty hug and gaze for a moment deep into her eyes. Next, please.
Edie Boardman asked Tommy Caffrey was he done, and he said yes. So then she buttoned up his little knickerbockers for him and told him to run off and play with Jackie and to be a good boy now and not to fight. But Tommy said he wanted the ball. And Edie told him no, that baby was playing with the ball, and if he took it, there'd be wigs on the green. But Tommy said it was his ball, and he wanted his ball, and he pranced on the ground, if you please. The temper of him. Oh, he was a man already, was little Tommy Caffrey, since he was out of his pinny. Edie told him no, and to be off with him, and she told Sissy Caffrey not to give it to him, into him. You're not my sister, naughty Tommy said. It's my ball. But Sissy Caffrey told baby Boardman to look up high at her finger, and she snatched the ball quickly and threw it along the sand, and Tommy after it in full career, having won the day. Anything for a quiet life, laughed Sis, and she tickled Tiny Tot's 2 cheeks to make him forget, and played Here's the Lord Mayor, here's his 2 horses, here's his gingerbread carriage, and here's he walks in, chin chopper, chin chopper, chin chopper, chin. But Edie got as cross as 2 sticks about him getting his own way like that, from everybody always petting him. I'd like to give him something, she said, so I would. Where I won't say. On the be-totty, laughed Sissy merrily. Gertie MacDowell bent down her head and crimsoned at the idea of Sissy saying an unlikely thing like that out loud. She'd be ashamed for life to say, flushing a deep rosy red. And Edie Boardman said she was sure the gentleman opposite heard what she said, but not a pin cares, Sis. Let him, she said, with a pert toss of her head and a frequent tilt of her nose. Give it to him, too, on the same place as quick as I'd look at him. Next, please. Oops.
Madcap Sis with her gollywog curls. You had to laugh at her sometimes. For instance, when she asked you, would you have some more Chinese tea and jaspberry ram? And when she drew the jugs too, and the men's faces on her nails with red ink make you split your sides, or when she wanted to go where she said she wanted to run and pay a visit to the Miss White. That was just like little Sissy comes. Oh, and will you ever forget the evening she dressed up in her father's suit and hat and the burned cork moustache and walked down Tritonville Road smoking a cigarette? There was none to come up to her for fun. But she was sincerity itself, one of the bravest and truest hearts heaven ever made. Not one of your two-faced things, too sweet to be wholesome. And then there came out upon the air the sound of voices and the pealing anthem of the organ. It was the men's temperance retreat conducted by the missioner, the Reverend John Hughes, S.J., Rosary, Sermon, and Benediction of the Most Holy Sacrament. They were there gathered together without distinction of social class, and a most edifying spectacle it was to see in that simple fane beside the waves, after the storms of this weary world, kneeling before the feet of the Immaculate, reciting the litany of Our Lady of Loretto, beseeching her to intercede for them. Next, please.
The old familiar words, Holy Mary, Holy Virgin of Virgins. How sad to poor Gertie's ears. Had her father only avoided the clutches of the demon drink by taking the pledge or those powders, the drink habit cured in Pearson's Weekly, she might now be rolling in her carriage, second to none. Over and over had she told herself that as she mused by the dying embers in a brown study without the lamp, because she hated two lights, or oftentimes gazing out the window dreamily by the hour at the rain falling on the rusty bucket, thinking. But that vile decoction, which has ruined so many hearts and homes, had cast its shadow over her childhood days. Nay, she had even witnessed in the home circle deeds of violence caused by intemperance, and had seen her own father a prey to the fumes of intoxication, forget himself completely, for if there was one thing of all things that Gertie knew, it was that the man who lifts his hand to a woman, save by way of kindness, deserves to be branded as the lowest of the low. And still the voices sang in supplication to the Virgin, most powerful, Virgin, most merciful. And Gertie, wrapped in thought, scarce saw or heard her companions, or the twins at their boyish gambols, or the gentleman of Sandymount Green that Sissy Caffrey called the man that was so like himself, passing along the Strand, taking a short walk. You never saw him anyway, Scrooge, but still, for all that, she would not like him for a father because he was too old, or something, or on account of his face. It was a palpable case of Dr. Fell, or his bunkly nose with the pimples on it, and his sandy moustache a bit white on his nose. Poor father, with all his faults, she loved him still when he sang, "Tell me, Mary, how to woo thee," or "My love and cottage near Rochelle." And they had stewed cockles and lettuce with Lazenby's salad dressing for supper. And when he sang, "The moon hath raised," with Mr. Dignam, that died suddenly and was buried. God have mercy on him from a stroke. Her mother's birthday, that was, and Charlie was home on his holidays, and Tom and Mr. Dignam and Mrs. and Patsy and Freddie Dignam, they were to have a group taken. No one would have thought the end was so near. Now he was laid to rest, and her mother said to him to let that be a warning to him for the rest of his days. And he couldn't even go to the funeral on account of the gout. And she had to go into town to bring him the letters and samples from his office about Catesby's Cork lino, artistic standard designs fit for a palace, tip-top wear, and always bright and cheery in the home. Trina.
A sterling good daughter was Gertie, just like the second mother in the house, a ministering angel too, with a little heart worth its weight in gold. And when her mother had those raging, splitting headaches, who was it that rubbed the menthol cone on her forehead but Gertie, though she didn't like her mother's taking pinches of snuff, and that was the only single thing they ever had words about, taking snuff. Everyone thought the world of her for her gentle ways. It was Gertie who turned off the gas at the main every night, and it was Gertie who tacked up on the wall of that place where she never forgot every fortnight the chlorate of lime Mr. Tunney, the grocer's Christmas almanac. The picture of halcyon days where a young gentleman in the costume they used to wear then with a three-cornered hat was offering a bunch of flowers to his lady love with old-time chivalry through her lattice window. You could see there was a story behind it. The colors were done something lovely. She was a soft, clinging white in a studied attitude, and the gentleman was in chocolate, and he looked a thorough aristocrat. She often looked at them dreamily when she went there for a certain purpose and felt her own arms were white and soft, just like hers, with the sleeves back, and thought about those times because she had found out in Walker's pronouncing dictionary that belonged to Grandpa Giltrap about the halcyon days, what they meant. The twins were now playing on the in the most approved brotherly fashion, till at last Master Jackie, who was really as bold as brass, there was no getting behind that, deliberately kicked the ball as hard as he ever could down towards the seaweedy rocks. Needless to say, poor Tommy was not slow to voice his dismay, but luckily the gentleman in black who was sitting there by himself came gallantly to the rescue and intercepted the ball. Our two champions claimed their plaything with lusty cries, and to avoid trouble, Sissy Caffrey called to the gentleman to throw it to her, please. The gentleman aimed the ball once or twice and then threw it up the strand towards Sissy Caffrey, but it rolled down the slope and stopped right under Gertie's skirt near the little pool by the rock. The twins clamored again for it, and Sissy told her to kick it away and let them fight for it. So Gertie drew back her foot, but she wished their stupid ball hadn't come rolling down to her, and she gave a kick, but she missed. And Edie and Sissy laughed. Next, please.
If you fail, try again, Edie Boardman said. Gertie smiled assent and bit her lip. A delicate pink crept into her pretty cheek, but she was determined to let them see. So she just lifted her skirt a little, but just enough, and took good aim and gave the ball a jolly good kick, and it went over so far, and the two twins after it down towards the shingle. Pure jealousy, of course it was, nothing else, to draw attention on account of the gentleman opposite looking. She felt the warm flush, a danger signal always with Gertie McDowell, surging and flaming into her cheeks. Till then they had only exchanged glances of the most casual, but now, under the brim of her new hat, she ventured a look at him, and the face that met her gaze there in the twilight, wan, strangely drawn, seemed to her the saddest she had ever seen. Through the open window of the church, the fragrant incense was wafted, and with it the fragrant names of her who was conceived without stain of original sin. Spiritual vessel, pray for us. Honorable vessel, pray for us. Vessel of singular devotion, pray for us. Mystical rose and careworn hearts were there, and toilers for their daily bread, and many who had erred and wandered, their eyes wet with contrition, but for all that, bright with hope. For the Reverend Father Hughes had told them what a great Saint Bernard said in his famous prayer of Mary, the most pious Virgin's intercessory power, that it was not recorded in any age that those who implored her powerful protection were ever abandoned by her. The twins were now playing again right merrily, for the troubles of childhood are but as fleeting summer showers. Sissy Caffrey played with baby Boardman till he crowed with glee, clapping baby hands in air. Peep, she cried behind the hood of the pushcar, and Edie asked, where was Sissy gone? And then Sissy popped up her head and cried, ah, and my word, didn't the little chap enjoy that? And then she told him to say papa. Say papa, baby. Say pop, 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 pop. And baby did his level best to say it, for he was very intelligent for 11 months, everyone said, and big for his age, and the picture of health, a perfect little bunch of love. He would certainly turn out to be something great, they said. Ha-ja, ja, ha-ja. Sissy wiped his little mouth with a dribbling bib and wanted him to sit up properly and say, pop, pop, pop. But when she undid the strap, she cried out, holy St. Dennis, that he was pussing wet, and to double the half blanket the other way under him. Of course, His Infant Majesty was most obstreperous at such toilet formalities, and he let everyone know it. Hop, 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 hop. Next.
And two great big lovely tears coursing down his cheeks. It was all no use soothing him with no, baby, no, and telling him about the Gigi, and where was the puff puff. But Sis, always ready-witted, gave him in his mouth the teat of the sucking bottle, and the young heathen was quickly appeased. Bertie wished to goodness they would take the squalling baby home out of that and not get on her nerves. No hour to be out, and the little brats of twins. She gazed out towards the distant sea. It was like the paintings that man used to do on the pavement, with all the coloured chalks, and such a pity too, leaving them there to be all blotted out. The evening and the clouds coming out, and the Bailey light of Hoth, and to hear the music like that, and the perfume of those incense they burned in the church like a kind of waft. And while she gazed, her heart went pit-a-pat. Yes, it was her he was looking at, and there was meaning in his look. His eyes burned into her as though they would search her through and through, read her very soul. Wonderful eyes they were, superbly expressive, but could you trust them? People were so queer. She could see at once by his dark eyes and his pale, intellectual face that he was a foreigner. The image of the photo she had of Martin Harvey, the matinee idol, only for the moustache, which she preferred because she wasn't stage-struck like Winnie Rippingham, that wanted they to always dress the same on account of the play. But she could not see whether he had an aquiline nose or a slightly retroussé from where he was sitting. He was in deep mourning, she could see that, and the story of a haunting sorrow was written on his face. She would have given words to know what it was. He was looking up so intently, so still, and saw her kick the ball, and perhaps he could see the bright steel buckles of her shoes, if she had swung them like that, thoughtfully with the toes down. She was glad that something told her to put on the transparent stockings, thinking Reggie Wiley might be out, but that was far away. Here was that of which she had so often dreamed. It was he who mattered, and there was joy on her face because she wanted him, because she felt instinctively that he was like no one else. The very heart of the girl woman went out to him, her dream husband, because she knew on the instant it was him. If he had suffered or sinned against than sinning, or even if he had been himself a sinner, a wicked man, she cared not. Even if he was a Protestant or Methodist, she could convert him easily if he truly loved her. There were wounds that wanted healing with heartbound. She was a womanly woman, not like other flighty girls, unfeminine. He had known those cyclists showing off what they hadn't got, and she just learned to know, she just yearned to know all. She'd forgive all if she could make him fall in love with her, make him forget the memory of the past. Then mayhap he would embrace her gently, like a real man, crushing her soft body to him, and love her, his bonus girlie for herself alone. Next, please.
Refuge of sinners, comfortess of the afflicted, ora pro nobis. Well has it been said that whoever prays to her with faith and constancy can never be lost or cast away. And fitly is she too a haven of refuge for the afflicted, because of the 7 dolors which transpierced her own heart. Gertie could picture the whole scene in the church. The stained glass windows lighted up, the candles, the flowers, and the blue banners of the Blessed Virgin's sodality. And Father Conroy was helping Canon O'Hanlon at the altar, carrying things in and out with his eyes cast down. He looked almost a saint, and his confession box was so quiet and clean and dark, and his hands were just like white wax. And if ever she became a Dominican nun, in their white habit perhaps, he would come to the convent for the novena of Saint Dominic. He told her that time when she told him about that in confession, crimsoning up to the roots of her hair for fear he could see. Not to be troubled, because that was only the voice of nature. And we were all subject to nature's laws, he said, in this life, and that there was no sin because that came from the nature of woman instituted by God, he said, and that our Blessed Lady herself said to the Archangel Gabriel, "Be it done unto me according to thy word." He was so kind and holy, and often she thought, could she work a ruched tea cozy with an embroidered floral design for him as a present, or a clock? But they had a clock, she noticed, on the mantelpiece, white and gold, with a canary bird that came out of a little house to tell the time of day. She went there about the flowers for the 40 hours adoration, because it was hard to know what sort of a present to give. Or perhaps an album of illuminated views of Dublin or someplace. The exasperating little brats of twins began to quarrel again, and Jackie threw the ball out towards the sea, and they both ran after it. Little monkeys, common as ditch water. Someone ought to take them and give them a good hiding for themselves to keep themselves in their place, the both of them. And Sissy and Edie shouted after them to come back because they were afraid the tide might come in on them and be drowned. Jackie, Tommy, next.
Yeah, not they. What a great notion they had. So Sissy said it was the very last time she'd ever bring them out. She jumped up and called them, and she ran down the slope past him, tossing her hair behind her, which had a good enough colour if there had been more of it. Oh dear. But with all the thingamary she was always rubbing into it, she couldn't get it to grow long because it wasn't natural. So she could just go and throw her hat at it. She ran with long, gandery strides. It was a wonder she didn't rip up her skirt at the side. I was too tight on her because there was a lot of the tomboy about Sissy Caffrey. And she was a forward piece whenever she thought she had a good opportunity to show off. And just because she was a good runner, she ran like that, so that he could see all the end of her petticoat running and her skinny shanks up as far as possible. It would have served her just right if she had tripped up over something accidentally, on purpose. Excuse me. And with her high, crooked French heels on her to make her look tall, and got a fine tableau. That would have been a very charming expose for a gentleman like that to witness. Queen of angels, queen of patriarchs, queen of prophets, of all saints, they prayed. Queen of the most holy rosary. And then Father Conroy handed the turtle to Canon O'Hanlon, and he put in the incense, and the Blessed Sacrament, and Sister Caffrey caught the two twins, and she was itching to give them a ringing good clip on the ear, but she didn't because she thought he might be watching. But she never made a bigger mistake in all her life, because Bertie could see without looking that he never took his eyes off of her. And then Canon O'Handle handed the turtle back to Father O'Conroy and knelt down, looking up at the Blessed Sacrament, and the choir began to sing Tantum Ergo, and she just swung her foot in and out in time as the music rose and fell to the Tantum Ergo Sacramum Tum. 3 and 11 she paid for those stockings in Sparrows of Joyce Street on the Tuesday. No, the Monday before Easter. And there wasn't a brack on them, and that was what he was looking at, transparent, and not at her insignificant ones that had neither shape nor form. The chic of her, because he had eyes in his head to see the difference for himself. Next, please.
Sissy came up along the strand with the two twins and their ball, with her hat anyhow on her to one side after her run, and she did look a streel, tugging the two kids along with the flimsy blouse she had bought only a fortnight before, like a rag on her back, and a bit of her petticoat hanging like a caricature. Gertie just took off her hat for a moment to settle her hair, and a prettier, a daintier head of nut brown tresses was never seen on a girl's shoulders. A radiant little vision, in sooth, almost maddening in its sweetness. You would have to travel many a long mile before you found a head of hair the like of that. She could almost see the swift answering flush of admiration in his eyes that set her tingling in every nerve. She put on her hat so that she could see from underneath the brim, and swung her buckled shoe faster, for her breath caught as she caught the expression in his eyes. He was eyeing her as a snake eyes its prey. Her woman's instinct told her that she had raised the devil in him, and at the thought a burning scarlet swept from throat to brow till the lovely colour of her face became a glorious rose. Next, please.
Edie Boardman was noticing it too, because she was squinting at Gertie, half smiling with her specs like an old maid, pretending to nurse the baby. Irritable little gnat she was, and always would be, and that was why no one could get on with her, poking her nose into what was no concern of hers. And she said to Gertie, "A penny for your thoughts." "What?" replied Gertie, with a smile reinforced by the whitest of teeth. "I was only wondering, was it late?" Because she wished to goodness they'd take the snotty-nosed twins and their baby home to the mischief out of that, so that was why she just gave a gentle hint about it being late. And when Sissy came up, Edie asked her the time. And Miss Sissy, as glib as you like, said it was past kissing time, time to kiss again. But Edie wanted to know, because they were told to be in early. "Wait," said Sissy, "I'll ask my Uncle Peter over there what's the time by his conundrum." So over she went, and when he saw her coming, she could see him take a hand out of his pocket, getting nervous and beginning to play with his watch chain, looking at the church. Passionate nature though he was, Gertie could see that he had enormous control over himself. One moment, he had been there, fascinated by a loveliness that made him gaze. And the next moment, it was the quiet, grey-faced gentleman. Self-control expressed in every line of his distinguished-looking figure. Sissy said to excuse her, but would he mind telling her what was the right time? And Gertie could see him taking out his watch, listening to it, and looking up and clearing his throat. And he said that he was very sorry his watch was stopped. But he thought it must be after 8 because the sun was set. His voice had a cultured ring in it. And though he spoke in measured accents, there was a suspicion of a quiver in his mellow tones. Sissy said thanks and came back with her tongue out, said, Uncle Teddy's waterworks were out of water. Trina.
Then they sang the second verse of the Tantum Ergo, and Canon O'Hanlon got up again and sensed the Blessed Sacrament and knelt down, and he told Father Conroy that one of the candles was just going to set fire to the flowers, and Father Conroy got up and settled it all right. And she could see the gentleman winding his watch and listening to the works, and she swung her leg more in and out in time. It was getting darker, but he could see, and he was looking all the time that he was winding the watch or whatever he was doing to it. And then he put it back and put his hands back into his pockets. She felt a kind of sensation rushing all over her, and she knew by the feel of her scalp and the irritation against her stays that the thing must be coming on, because the last time, too, when she clipped her hair on account of the moon. The last time, too, was when she clipped her hair on the time of the moon. On account of his dark eyes fixed themselves on her again, drinking in her every contour, literally worshiping at her shrine. If ever there was undisguised admiration in a man's passionate gaze, it was there, plain to be seen on that man's face. It is for you, Gertrude McDowell, and you know it. Edie began to get ready to go, and it was high time for her, and Gertie noticed that little hint she gave had the desired effect, because it was a long way along the Strand to where there was a place to push up the pushcart, and Sissy took off the twins' caps and tidied their hair to make herself attractive, of course, and Canon O'Hanlon stood up with his coat poking at his neck, and Father Conroy handed him the card to read off, and he read out Panem de Coeli Praesistidi Eis. And Edie and Sissy were talking about the time all the time and asking her, but Gertie could pay them back in his own coin, and she had answered with scathing politeness when Edie asked her was she heartbroken about her best boy throwing her over. Gertie winced sharply. A brief cold blaze shone from her eyes that spoke volumes of scorn immeasurable. It hurt. Oh yes, it cut deep, because Edie had her own quiet way of saying things like that she knew would wound, like the confounded little cat she was. Gertie's lips parted swiftly to frame the word, but she fought back the sob that rose to her throat, so slim, so flawless, so beautifully molded, it seemed one artist might have dreamed of. She had loved him better than he knew. Light-hearted deceiver and fickle like all his sex, he would never understand what he had meant to her, and for an instant there was in the blue eyes a quick stinging of tears. Their eyes were probing her mercilessly, but with a brave effort she sparkled back in sympathy as she glanced at her new conquest for them to see. Next, please.
Oh, responded Gertie, quick as lightning, laughing, and the proud head flashed up. I can throw my cap at who I like because it's leap year. Her words rang out crystal clear, more musical than the cooing of the ringdove, but they cut the silence icily. There was that in her young voice that told you that she was not a one to be lightly trifled with. As for Mr. Reggie with his swank and his bit of money, she could just chuck him aside as if he was so much filth, and never again would she cast as much as a second thought on him and tear his silly postcard into a dozen pieces. And if ever after he dared to presume, she could give him one look of measured scorn that would make him shrivel up on the spot. Miss puny little Edie's countenance fell to no slight extent, and Gertie could see by her looking as black as thunder that she was simply in a towering rage, though she hid it, little kinnet, because that shaft had struck home for her petty jealousy, and they both knew that she was something aloof, apart, in another sphere, that she was not of them and never would be, and there was somebody else too that knew it and saw it, so they could put it in their pipe and smoke it. Edie straightened up baby Boardman to get ready to go, and Sissy tucked in the ball and the spades and buckets, and it was high time too, because the Sandman was on his way from Mr. Boardman Jr. And Sissy told him that Billy Winks was coming, and that baby was to go deed-off, and baby looked just too ducky, laughing up out of his gleeful eyes, and Sissy poked him like that out of fun in his wee fat tummy, and baby, without so much as a by your leave, sent up his compliments to all and sundry on his brand new dribbling babe. Oh my, put me pie, protested Sis. He has his bib destroyed. This slight contretemps claimed her attention, but in 2 twos, she set little matter to rights. Next.
Gertie stifled a smothered exclamation and gave a nervous cough, and Edie asked what, and she was just going to tell her to catch it while it was flying, but it was ever ladylike in her deportment, so she simply passed it off with consummate tact by saying that was the benediction, just then the bell rang out from the steeple over the quiet seashore, because Canon O'Hanlon was up on the altar with the veil that Father Conroy put around to his shoulders, giving the benediction with the Blessed Sacrament in his hands. How moving the scene there in the gathering twilight. The last glimpse of Erin, the touching chime of those evening bells, and at the same time a bat flew forth from the ivied belfry through the dusk, hither, thither, with a tiny lost cry. And she could see far away the lights of the lighthouses, so picturesque. She would have loved to do with a box of paints, because it was easier than to make a man, and soon the lamplighter would be going his rounds past the Presbyterian church grounds and along by shady Tritonville Avenue, where the couples walked, and lighting the lamp near her window where Reggie Wiley used to turn his freewheel, like she read in that book, The Lamplighter by Miss Cummins, author of Mabel Vaughan and Other Tales. For Gertie had her dreams that no one knew of. She loved to read poetry, and when she got a keepsake from Bertha Supple of that lovely confession album with the coral pink cover to write her thoughts in, she laid it in the drawer of her toiletable, which, though it did not err on the side of luxury, was scrupulously neat and clean. It was there she kept her girlish treasures trove, the tortoise shell combs, her Child of Mary badge, the white rose scent, the eyebrow lane, her alabaster pouncet box, and the ribbons to change when her things came home from the wash. And there were some beautiful thoughts written in it in violet ink that she bought in Healy's of Dame Street, where she felt that she too could write poetry if she could only express herself, like that poem that appealed to her so deeply, that she had copied out of the newspaper she found one evening round the pot herbs. Art thou real, my ideal? It was called by Louis J. Walsh Maharafelt. And after something about twilight wilt thou ever, and oft times the beauty of poetry, though sad in its transient loveliness, had misted her eyes with silent tears that the years were slipping by for her one by one. And but for that one shortcoming, she knew she need fear no competition. And that was an accident coming down Dalkey Hill, and she always tried to conceal it. Next, please.
But it must end, she felt. If she saw the magic lure in his eyes there would be no holding back for her. Love laughs at locksmiths. She would make the great sacrifice. Her every effort would be to share his thoughts. Dearer than the whole world would she be to him, and gild his days with happiness. There was the all-important question, and she was dying to know, was he a married man or a widower who had lost his wife, or some tragedy like the nobleman with a foreign name from the land of song had to have her put in a madhouse, cruel only to be kind. But even if, what then? Would it make a very great difference? For everything in the least indelicate in her fine-bred nature instinctively recoiled. She loathed that kind of person, the fallen woman, off the accommodation walk beside the daughter, that went with the soldiers and coursemen, with no respect for a girl's honor, degrading the sex and being taken up to the police station. No, not that. They would be just good friends, like a big brother and sister, without all that other, in spite of the conventions of society with a big S. Perhaps it was an old flame he was mourning for from the days beyond recall. She thought she understood. She would try to understand him because men were so different. The old love was waiting with little white hands stretched out with blue appealing eyes. Heart of mine. She would follow her dream of love, the dictates of her heart that told her that he was her all in all. The only man in all the world for her to love was the master guide. Nothing else mattered. Come what might, she would be wild, untrammeled, free. Canon O'Hanlon put the Blessed Sacrament back in the tabernacle, and the choir sang Laudate Dominum, omnes gentes. And then he looked at the tabernacle door because the benediction was over, and Father Conroy handed him his hat to put on. And Cross Cat Edie asked, wasn't she coming? But Sissy Caffrey called out, oh, look, Sissy. Next.
And they all looked. Was it sheet lighting? But Tommy saw it too over the trees beside the church, blue and then green and purple. It's fireworks, Sissy Caffrey said, and they all ran down the strand to see over the houses and the church, helter-skelter. Edie with the pushcar with Beatty Boardman in it, and Sissy holding Tommy and Jackie by the hand so they wouldn't fall running. Come on, Gertie, Sissy called. It's the bazaar fireworks. But Gertie was adamant. She had no intention of being at their beck and call. If they could run like Rossi, she could sit as so she could, or so she said. She could see from where she was. The eyes that were fastened upon her to set her pulses tingling. She looked at him a moment, meeting his glance, and a light broke in upon her. White-hot passion was in that face. Passion silent as the grave, and it had made her his. At last they were left alone without the others to pry and pass remarks, and she knew he could be trusted to the death. Steadfast, a sterling man, a man of inflexible honour to his fingertips. His hands and face were working, and a tremor went over her. She leaned back far to look up where the fireworks were, and she caught her knee, in her hands, so as not to fall back looking up. And there was no one to see, only him and her. And when she revealed all her graceful, beautifully shaped legs like that, soft and delicately round, supply soft and delicately rounded, and she seemed to hear the panting of his heart, his hoarse breathing, because she knew about the passion of men like that. Hot-blooded, because Bertie's supple told her once in dead secret, and made her swear she'd never, about the gentleman lodger that was staying with them, out of the congested districts board, that had pictures cut out of papers, and those skirt dancers and high kickers, and she said he used to do something not very nice that you could imagine sometimes in the bed. But this was altogether different from a thing like that, because there was all the difference, because she could almost feel him draw her face to his, and the first quick hot touch of his handsome lips. Besides, there was absolution, so long as you didn't do the other thing before being married, and there ought to be women priests that would understand without you telling out. And Sissy Caffrey too sometimes had that dreamy look in her eyes, so that she too, my dear, and Winnie Wimpelham, so mad about actors' photographs. And besides, it was on account of that other thing coming on the way it did. Next, please.
And Jackie Caffrey shouted to look. There was another, and she leaned back, and the garters were blue to match on account of the transparent. And they all saw it and shouted to look, there it was. and she leaned back ever so far to see the fireworks, and something queer was flying about through the air, a soft thing, to and fro, dark. And she saw a long Roman candle going up over the trees, up, up, and in this tense hush, they were all breathless with excitement as it went higher and higher, and she had to lean back more and more to look up after it, high, high, almost out of sight, and her face was suffused with a divine, an entrancing blush from straining back, and he could see her other things too, nainsook, knickers, the fabric that caresses the skin better than those other petty with the green 4 and 11 on account of being white. And she let him, and she saw that he saw. And then it went so high, it went out of sight a moment, and she was trembling in every limb from being bent so far back. He had a full view, high up above her knee, where no one ever, not even on the swing or wading. And she wasn't ashamed, and he wasn't either, to look in that immodest way like that, because he couldn't resist the sight of the wondrous revealment, half offered, like those skirt dancers behaving so immodest before gentlemen, looking, and he kept on looking, looking. She would fain have cried to him chokingly, held out her snowy, slender arms to him to come, to feel his lips laid on her white brow, the cry of a young girl's love, a little strangled cry, wrung from her, that cry that has rung through the ages. And then a rocket sprang, and bang shot blind, and oh, then the Roman candle burst, and it was like a sigh of oh, and everyone cried, oh, oh, in raptures, and it gushed out of it a stream of rain gold hair threads, and they shed, and they were all greeny, dewy stars falling with golden, oh, so lovely, oh, so soft, sweet, soft. Next, please.
Then all melted away, dewily, in the grey air. All was silent. She glanced at him as she bent forward quickly, a pathetic little glance of piteous protest, of shy reproach, under which he coloured like a girl. He was leaning back against the rock behind. Leopold Bloom, for it is he, stands silent, with bowed head before those young, guileless eyes. What a brute he had been, at it again. A fair, unsullied soul had called to him, and wretch that he was, how had he answered? An utter cad he had been, he of all men. But there was an infinite store of mercy in those eyes. For him, too, a word of pardon, even though he had erred and sinned and wandered. Should a girl tell? No, 1,000 times no. That was their secret, only theirs. Alone in the hiding twilight, there was none to know or tell, save the little bat that flew so softly through the evening to and fro, and little bats don't tell. Sissy Caffrey whistled, imitating the boys in the football field, to show what a great person she was, and then she cried, Gertie, Gertie, we're going, come on! We can see from further up. Gertie had an idea, one of love's little ruses. She slipped a hand into her kerchief pocket and took out the wadding and waved in reply, of course, without letting him, and then slipped it back. Wonder if he's too far. She rose. Was it goodbye? No. She had to go. They would meet again, there. And she would dream of that till then, tomorrow, of her dream of yesterday. She drew herself up to her full height. Their souls met in a last lingering glance. And the eyes that had reached her heart, full of a strange shining, hung enraptured on her sweet, flower-like face. She half smiled at him wanly, a sweet, forgiving smile, a smile that verged on tears. And then they parted. Trina.
Slowly, without looking back, she went down the uneven strand to Sissy, to Edie, to Jackie and Tommy Caffrey, to little baby Boardman. It was darker now, and there were stones and bits of wood on the strand and slippy seaweed. She walked with a certain quiet dignity characteristic of her, but with care and very slowly, because Gertie McDowell was tight boots? No, she's lame. Oh, Mr. Bloom watched her as she limped away. Poor girl. That's why she's left on the shelf and the others did a sprint. Thought something was wrong by the cut of her jib. Jilted beauty. A defect is 10 times worse in a woman, but makes them polite. Glad I didn't know it when she was on show. Hot little devil all the same. I wouldn't mind. Curiosity like a nun or a negress or a girl with glasses. That squinty one is delicate. Near her monthlies, I expect, makes them feel ticklish. I have such a bad headache today. Where did I put the letter? Yes, all right. All kinds of crazy longings. Licking pennies. Girl in Tranquilla convent that nun told me liked to smell rock oil. Virgins go mad in the end, I suppose. Sister? How many women in Dublin have it today? Martha, something in the air. That's the moon. But then why don't all women menstruate at the same time with the same moon? I mean, depends on the time they were born, I suppose. Or all start scratch, then get out of step. Sometimes Molly and Millie together. Anyhow, I got the best of that. Damn glad I didn't do it in the bath this morning over her silly "I will punish you" letter. Made up for that tram driver this morning. That gouger McCoy stopped me to say nothing, and his wife engagement in the country valise, voice like a pickaxe. Thankful for small mercies. Cheap, too, yours for the asking, because they want it themselves, their natural craving. Shoals of them every evening poured out of offices. Reserve better. Don't want it if they throw it at you. Catch them alive. Oh, pity they can't see themselves. A dream of well-filled hose. Where was that? Ah, yes, mutoscope pictures in Capel Street for men only. Peeping Tom, Willie's hat, and what the girls did with it. Do they snapshot those girls in it all a fake? Or is it all a fake? Lingerie does it. Felt for the curves inside her dishabille. It excites them also when they're free, when they're, I'm all clean, come and dirty me. And they like dressing one another for the sacrifice. Millie delighted with Molly's new blouse at first, put them on to take them all off. Molly, why I bought her violet garters. Us too, the tie he wore, his lovely socks and turned up trousers. He wore a pair of gaiters the night that first we met. His lovely shirt was shining beneath his wet of jet. Say a woman loses a charm with every pin she takes out. Pinned together, oh, Mary lost a pin of her, dressed up to the nines for somebody. Next, please.
Fashion, part of their charm, just changes when you're on the track of the secret, except the East. Mary, Martha, now as then, no reasonable offer refused. She wasn't in a hurry either. Always off to a fellow when they are. They never forget an appointment. Out on spec, probably. They believe in chance because, like themselves, and the others inclined to give her an odd dig. Girlfriends at school, arms around each other's necks, or with 10 fingers locked, kissing and whispering secrets about nothing in the convent garden. Nuns with whitewashed faces, cool coifs and their rosaries going up and down. Addicted, too, for what they can't get. Barbed wire. Be sure now and write to me, and I'll write to you now, won't you? Molly and Josie Powell. Till Mr. Right comes along, then meet once in a blue moon. Tableau. Oh, look who it is, for the love of God. How are you at all? What have you been doing with yourself? Kiss and delighted to, kiss to see you, picking holes in each other's appearance. You're looking splendid, sister souls, showing their teeth at one another. How many have you left? Would lend each other a pinch of salt. Ah, devils they are when that's coming on them, dark, devilish appearance. Molly often told me, feel things a ton weight. Scratch the sole of my foot. Oh, that's exquisite. Feel it myself too. Good to rest once in a while. Wonder if it's bad to go with them then. Safe in one way. Turns milk, makes fill strings snap. Something about withering plants I read in the garden. Besides, they say if the flower withers, she wears a flirt. Besides, they say if the flower withers, she's a flirt. All are. Dare say she felt I. When you feel like that, you often meet what you feel. Like me or what? Dress they look at. Always know what they look like. Collars and cuffs. Well, cocks and lions do the same, and stags. Same time, I prefer a tie undone or something. Trousers? I suppose when I was, no, gently does it. Dislike rough and tumble. Kiss in the dark, I never tell. Saw something in me. Wonder what. Sooner have me as I am than some poet chap with bear's grease, plastery hair, lovelock over his dexter optic. To aid gentlemen in literary, or to attend to my appearance, my age. Did let her see me in profile. Still, you never know. Pretty girls and ugly men marrying, Beauty and the Beast. Besides, I can't be so if Molly took off her hat to show her hair. Wide brim. Bought to hide her face. Meeting someone might know her. Bend down or carry a bunch of flowers to smell. Hair strong and rut. Tin bob I got from Molly's combing when we were on the rocks in Hall Street. Why not? Suppose he gave her money. Why not? All the prejudice. She's worth 10, 15 more a pound. What? I think so. All that for nothing. Bold hand. Mrs. Marion. Did I forget to write the address on that letter, like the postcard I sent to Flynn? And the day I went to Drimmy's without a necktie. Wrangle with Molly it was put me off. No, I remember. Richie Goulding, he's another. Weighs on his mind. Funny, my watch stopped at 4:30. Dust. Shark liver oil they used to clean. I do it myself. Save. What was just when we did. Into her. She did. Done. Huh. Next, please.
Bloom, with careful hand, recomposed his wet shirt. Oh Lord, that little limping devil begins to feel cold and clammy. After effect, not pleasant. Still, you have to get rid of it some way. They don't care. Compliment it, perhaps. Go home to nicey bread and milky and say night prayers with the kiddies. Well, aren't they? See her as she is, spoil all. Must have the stage setting, the rouge, costume, position, music. The name too, amour of actresses. Nell Gwynn, Mrs. Bracegirdle, Maud Branscombe, curtain up, moonlight, silver effulgence, maiden discovered with pensive bosom. Little sweetheart, come and kiss me. Still I feel the strength it gives a man. That's the secret of it. Good job I let off there behind coming out of Dignam's. Cider that was. Otherwise I couldn't have. It makes you want to sing after. A caus essant tara. Suppose I spoke to her. What about? Bad plan, however, if you don't know how to end the conversation. Ask them a question, they ask you another. Good idea if you're in a cart. Wonderful, of course, if you say, good evening, and you see she's on for it. Good evening. Oh, but the dark evening in the Appian Way, I nearly spoke to Mrs. Clinch, oh, thinking she was. Phew, girl in Mead Street that night. All the dirty things I made her say, all wrong, of course. My arcs, she called it. It's so hard to find one who, oh, if you don't answer when they solicit, must be horrible for them till they harden, and kiss my hand when I gave her the extra 2 shillings. Parrots, press the button and the bird will squeak. Wish she hadn't called me sir, on her mouth in the dark. And you a married man with a single girl. That's what they enjoy, taking a man from another woman, or even hear of it. Different with me, glad to get away from another chap's wife, eating off his cold plate. Chap in the Burton today, spitting back gum-chewed gristle. French letters still in my pocketbook. Cause of half the trouble. But might happen sometime, I don't think. Come in. All is prepared. I dreamt. What? Worst is beginning. How they change the venue when it's not what they like. Ask you, do you like mushrooms? Because she once knew a gentleman who, or ask you what someone was going to say when he changed his mind and stopped. Yes, if I went the whole hog, say, I want to, something like that. Because I did, she too, offend her, then make it up, pretend to want something awfully, then cry off for her sake, flatters them. She must have been thinking of someone else all the time. What harm? Must, since she came to the use of reason, he, and he. First kiss does the trick, the propitious moment. Something inside them goes pop. Mushy like, tell by their eye, on the sly, first thoughts are best. Remember that till their dying day. Molly, Lieutenant Mulvey, that kissed her under the Moorish wall beside the gardens. 15, she told me, but her breasts were developed. Fell asleep then, after Glencree dinner, that was, when we drove home the Featherbed Mountain, gnashing her teeth in sleep. Lord Mayor had his eye on her too, Val Dillon, apoplectic. Next, please.
I think we'll stop right here. Yeah, we couldn't possibly finish today. And I think this is a good place. This is a good place to stop.
We need a breather.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, there's a lot.
You know, this time as we were reading Gertie's parts, I got the feeling that it was as if Gertie was writing her story and telling it to herself.
Yeah.
That it wasn't really third party. It was, and now I'm doing this, and now I'm doing that. And she was observing herself and presenting herself as the main attraction. And I hadn't caught that before.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, she's replaying a lot of romance novels.
Yes.
That she's in her
Yes.
head and
Yes.
projecting
She's-
herself as the main character.
Yeah.
So what's happening here, what happens in this part of the story, is a departure from what's called the initial style, where we have just the stream of consciousness and we go in and out of people's minds. What happens gradually in these episodes is that the narrator appears to become infected or affected by the thoughts of a character. And
Hmm.
more and more through as we go on, at this part, we'll find that the characters are taking over the book and displacing the narrator. And you only begin to notice it after a while. Who is the narrator of this episode? You know, like it's practically Gertie. And that point starts in Cyclops with Gary Owen, the dog. And just before that, recitation of a poem by the dog, we are inside Gary Owen's mind. We have to be, because there's no one else in the episode that can convey those thoughts, least of all the narrator. So, and this goes on and on. This is going to grow and grow, and there's great debate as to who the narrators are in these episodes onwards. It's great fun.
Mm-hmm.
I'd just say, Joe, that you're right, I think, about the stream of consciousness that has come in and out. But
Yeah.
when we got to the point in this chapter where it said, tight boots, no, she's lame, oh, then it's Bloom and his thoughts.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
we've actually
Yeah.
stopped in the middle of his thoughts.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That it's Bloom's thoughts that we're getting. And I did say that gradually the characters begin to displace the narrator.
Mhm.
It's gradually, but very distinctly and powerfully. And it's kind of Flann O'Brien before there was a Flann O'Brien, you know.
Mm.
And we actually stay with Bloom's thoughts right to the end of the chapter.
That's right, yeah, and that's the way it's described. Yeah, that we're
Well, Gertie literally
Gertie's view, and then you get Bloom's view of the same events.
Right.
Mhm.
And Gertie literally walks off the stage.
Yeah,
Yes.
we don't know whether it was stage left or stage right.
Followed by a bear.
I think it's stage left myself.
I think you might be right.
I don't know why I think it, but I think it's and Bloom left on the stage. And what I find really fascinating is how quickly Bloom's mood changes.
Yes.
I mean, he has this climactic thing that happens to him, and he recognizes, and he starts feeling guilty about it, and then he just goes on to other stuff. It's like,
But that's good old Catholic guilt kicking in, particularly when he was in the shadow of a church.
okay, and that's how you get away from the guilt feeling, is you just
Oh, it's priceless. Of course, this is the episode that so upset what were they called? The people in New York, the Society for the Prevention of whatever it was. I can't remember.
oh right, it was the prevention of vice.
The prevention.
This was the episode which got the Ulysses banned in the United States.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing about this chapter that confuses me, there's not another thing that confuses me, but another thing that I wanted to discuss is, while this is all going on between Gertie and the girls and the kids, there's a benediction service going on somewhere.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the girls and the little kids are not in the church. They're outside playing ball.
That's right.
But they're very
It's
close
one
to
for
the
men. But it's for men.
It's
for
The
men only.
benediction service only for men. Oh, okay.
It's
I
the
did not know
Men's
that.
Temperance Society.
Ah, okay. Now that's all coming together.
These are guys who are displacing their urge to drink.
It's an AA meeting by a different name.
Well, but a religious form of,
Mhm.
and they're displacing their urge for drink, and it kind of matches Mr. Bloom's urges, you know, that he
Yes.
in a totally different way.
Like the different narrators, the events at the church become a narration in themselves also.
Yeah.
And it's interspersed with Gertie's thoughts and Bloom's thoughts.
And,
Right.
and Gertie's description of herself, as it were, the narrator's description of her, is the description of a statue of the Blessed Virgin Mary, if you read it.
Well, we have an interesting situation where we're reading a book, and we've got one character who is acting out a book, Gertie, is acting out a book. And then we have the church thing, which you could also say is kind of acting out a book. So we got two books being acted out while we're reading a book.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I know. That's the thing. And that's the Star of the Sea Church in Sandymount, which is still there.
Mm.
And has windows that cannot be opened. So the music, the sound coming out through the windows cannot happen. But who cares? You know, it's just, you know, this is a novel.
Huh.
Joyce might have
I just
forgotten
read-
that after we went abroad.
Yes, yeah. It's just one of those, you know, smart aleck remarks, you know, to make. But it's a, you can picture it, the coast has changed there as well. The sea doesn't come quite in as to where the book is set. But you
And
can
does
still imagine it.
did the Temperance Society have to go to confession before the whole event that was happening? Because on page 329, you were talking about Lois earlier. It's like she was writing it down. She talks about her lovely confession album that she was given by Bertha Supple.
Mhm.
So I wonder, is there some sort of, like, they've all confessed and they're having an epiphany, as Joyce would say. No, maybe not an epiphany, some cathartic.
Yes.
Well, maybe I'm wrong, but I think
Bloom
Bertha,
moves outside. So there's women, kids, and Bloom.
Mhm. I think Bertha Supple, though, is the bad girl who's telling
She is, yeah. It's
Gertie
said
the
about her in the
actual
book.
life.
Mm.
Is a streel, which is a very low form of person.
Yeah. And then the little boys, you know, the little boys that start with their sandcastle. They kind of echo the big boys in episode 1. You know,
Mhm.
who you know, just have you got the key and all this kind of, you know,
Mhm. Mhm.
the little running
Oh, that's a good point.
argument between Mulligan and Stephen, you know, is echoed in the babies. The babies are behaving like the adults, and the adults have been behaving like the babies earlier over a tower, over a, you know, a sandcastle. And the keys kind of.
I love the way that James Joyce has Gertie moving between her fantasy world and then her peak at the children and the other women that she's with.
Yes.
Would they ever take them home?
Yeah.
So they ever, yeah, and the irony is she probably wouldn't be at the beach at all if it
Yeah.
wasn't for them.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
No, in fact.
Yeah.
But of course, that's so much like all of us, though, where you know we for whatever reason or another we start getting a little irritated because suddenly our, shall we say, our enablers are in the way of something.
Yeah.
Many of you have read Dan Mulhall's Guide to Ulysses. Dan was the ambassador to Washington until quite recently.
Yeah.
And he mentions in the guide, he talks about Nausicaa being broken into two parts. You have the Gertie part and you have the Bloom part. But he said, here he provides a 2-page description of Gertie, a character who may be based in part on Martha Fleischmann, a
Yes.
Swiss woman Joyce had a brief affair with in Zurich in 1918.
That's right. Yeah.
I don't know where you can get that from, but that's what he says.
Well, that's from the biography.
Yeah.
She's a combination of a lady called Gertrude Kampfner and Martha Fleischmann.
Okay.
In 1917, I think it was, his eyesight became suddenly very bad, and they moved to the south of Switzerland, severe glaucoma, and a place called Locarno, a small place, and he was bored out of his mind as soon as he got there. He thought it was going to be a great place to write, and he couldn't. And also there was a Gertrude Kampfner, 26-year-old single girl from Germany, who was unusual. She was a woman doctor. And Joyce was always fascinated by medicine. And the idea of a woman doctor, she must have been very rare. And she was recovering from tuberculosis. And he was there with Nora, and he invited this Gertrude, to communicate with him online, by post, to a postal address in Zurich, you see. And he wrote letters to her and that, but there was no way she was getting into this, And he wrote a number of letters to her, and Gertrude Kempner was destroyed them all. She said they were so disgusting. But then when would it be? In 1918, about a year later, he meets Martha Fleischmann. And Martha has kind of delusions of grandeur. She believes herself to be a member of the royal family of the city of Bern in Switzerland. And he develops, you see, as people would say, this is all to do for the good of art, of course. And he's fascinated by her ideas of being a princess and so on. So that's how he writes Gertie, inspired by that, but he swaps the girls round. Martha Clifford does this postal thing that he wanted Gertrude to do, and Gertrude does the princess thing. Martha Fleischmann was doing, and he had no compunction at all about telling all about this to his biographer. So there you go.
And did he tell Molly?
I have no idea. But you see, these guys were, this is the modernists, but they were all kind of thinking about free love. And the biographer says that Nora was, at that time, as Frank Budgeon says that Nora was complaining to him. This is Joyce's friend, that he was encouraging her to go and meet other men.
Sorry, I should have said Nora instead of Molly. I confused both of them.
Yeah. So I wouldn't be surprised, but he told her about it. I wouldn't be surprised at all, because he didn't seem to have any compunction. But it's the artistic temperament, you see, But having said that, nothing happened. There was nothing, there was never any, Martha Fleischmann always said that, there was never any physical contact. But Martha Fleischmann has spent time, it ended when she had to go into a sanatorium for treatment. And her lover, who, but she had this gentleman lover, went and spoke to Joyce about it and told him to lay off. Which he did. So there you go. But it's all in the biography. You read on and it's all there. It's unbelievable stuff.
Wow, that's great. Thank you. That's
wonderful.
wonderful.
Enthusiasm yet to face Elman, I'm afraid. I'm waiting. I'm waiting for the next COVID lockdown to read Elma.
Elman is nearly like Ulysses again. Except he does the wake as well.
Yeah.
So Joyce was encouraging his wife to do what Bloom does in the book to his wife.
And what Molly will, I mustn't jump to the end, but Molly will talk about it as well at the end. And yes, but you see, they all wear the Bloomsbury set, and you know, they were all talking a great game. I don't know how many, I don't know if much was being done, but they were exploring boundaries.
And was Joyce still in Trieste at this stage, or had they moved to Paris?
Zurich.
It was one of Joyce's students, wasn't it,
Ariane?
Joe? It was one of Joyce's students that used to come to the house.
No, that's a document called Giacomo Joyce. I
thought Giacomo Joyce was the school and the young one that Joyce fancied in the school.
That's it. That's what that's.
Yeah, but they used to. Didn't Joyce have somebody who used to come to the house for lessons?
There was,
and he was encouraging a relationship there with Nora.
Yeah, I can't remember her name, but you're right. That's
there's two different things.
Yeah,
and I can't remember either, even though I read it.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm working from memory as well. It's very hard to keep track of them all.
Yeah.
I have the books there. I'll have to have a look.
Yeah, but you have to research. It takes hours to look at these things, you know.
Yes.
They're in it. It's 1917, 18. So they're in Zurich. They're waiting for the war ends. It goes back to Trieste.
Right, the war is ending, and Spanish flu is actually at the time.
Yeah. But I love this episode. I think it's hilarious. I can't stop laughing when it's we're reading.
Right. This is all very. I don't know who's familiar with Gurdjieff, but Gurdjieff was a Russian guru who actually was the guru for Margaret Anderson. Margaret Anderson and Anne Heap. I'm not sure whether Anne Heap ever became a disciple of Gurdjieff, but Margaret Anderson ended up in Paris.
Yes.
She was there was a group of lesbian women in Paris who became disciples of Gurdjieff, and of course there was Margaret Anderson and Anne Heap, who did the Little Review in New York, and made great sacrifices for Joyce. And they finally got arrested, and I think they were put in jail and put out of business and all of that. Their teacher, Gurdjieff, his major thing was that we're all kind of puppets of our history and culture and religion, and we have very little autonomy. And the only way to gain autonomy is by really becoming aware of all these strings, which are pulling on us and getting us to think certain thoughts and move in certain directions.
Yes.
So there's another thing like with Gertie, the Gertie is being kind of pulled by strings in a sense.
Okay, and as you said at the start, the consumerism. I mean, it's.
No, I don't think Gertie has one original. I would, in fact, if you can, I would appreciate, but I don't think you can find one original thought in Gertie's head. I think everything she says and everything she thinks can be traced back to advertisements and romance novels.
Yes, that's right. Did
Mills and Boon exist at that time?
Did what exist?
Did Mills and Boon exist at that time?
They did.
Well, the book she mentions is The Lamplighter by somebody called Cummins.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And that was a book, and apparently Joyce had that, or he got a copy of it somewhere to help him right when he was writing this, because it was memsy pamsy, Mills
Yeah.
and Boons type of thing. So
Mm.
that was why that was mentioned.
Well, Mills and Boone were definitely there. That's it. And they're
Yeah,
definitely
yeah.
My uncle used to call them concrete covered novels, Mills and Boone novels. Remember the game, they were thick novels.
didn't Mi- didn't Mills and Boone? Forgive me now. I'm working from back of a very confused head sometimes. There's didn't they reject the dead? Didn't
I
he
don't
submit
know.
the dead to Mills and Boone
Really?
for publication? I believe. I don't know whether I've imagined that or read it.
Surely he wouldn't have submitted the dead to Mills and Boone.
Oh, well,
I
he
don't
couldn't
think
get published. He'd do anything, you know. But it says everything about poor old Mills and Boone, you know.
Mm, mm. I might as well throw in a reference to Don Quixote while I'm at it. Because
Yes.
of course, you know, up to this particular time, Don Quixote is one of the greatest novels based upon a person basing their personality on novels. Instead of romance novels, they're novels of chivalry, the
Yes.
knights of old and all that kind of stuff.
Old. What about the back?
Mills and Boone started in 1908.
1908.
1908. Okay.
Hmm.
Lois, would you give me the Gabler number that we're on?
Yes, I would if I could find my bookmark. Here we go. 304, and the line is, "There she is with them down there for the fireworks."
Okay, and Donna, would you give me the penguin number?
367.
367.
Yeah.
Okay, and I've got the Wordsworth here, 335. Are there any other additions that I need to make note of?
The Long Penguin is 483.
Long Penguin is 483. Okay. Okay. I have one question, which is very trivial. And it has to do with on Wordsworth 333. This is after the climax of the this episode. And Bloom says, "Made up for that tram driver this morning."
Yeah.
Oh,
And I
I-
don't.
That's
what-
when
I-
he gets, there's a tram driver that gets in the way when he's looking at the woman
Yeah.
and getting into the, she's getting
Outside
into
the hotel.
Oh, yes.
All right.
Okay.
going
Yes,
up
yes.
going up the
Got
steps, and he can see her ankles. Yeah.
The Grosvenor
Right,
Hotel.
right.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
And I gave you the wrong penguin page number. It's 369. The page had blown over.
Okay.
You know,
It's-
Duncan, that phrase that you just gave us, it's like doing a crossword, because when you first read it, I said, when you just read it now, made up, I'm thinking, that mean he was watching a woman putting her makeup on? So it's that crossword kind of thing where you're using a word that could be a noun, could be a verb, could have 14 different meanings, and he does it all the time.
Yes.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, well, he does everything that he possibly can to make us aware of how language works.
Mhm.
You know,
Mm.
it's just amazing. I mean, and of course, I get enormous pleasure and I get lots of laughs, and I'm always aghast at how psychologically astute he is and all that. But then there's that whole language and rhetoric level,
Mhm.
which is actually I'm getting better, meaning I'm becoming more aware of, you know, of the little tricks and how words work and stuff. Quite marvelous.
Mhm.
Mm. Absolutely.
Excellent.
Dirty little dreams. Oh, yeah. And also I like on 329, that little subtle thing, the thing that we eventually realize she's referring to her lameness, where she's,
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
she said, but for that one little shortcoming
Yeah.
on page 329 in the Wadsworth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pun intended, I'm sure.
Yeah.
That's
I,
true.
I think Martha Fleischman was lame.
Huh.
Uh-huh.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's a critical piece of evidence.
wow.
Again, you know, working from memory, but I'm pretty sure of it. And he did arrive round to Budgeon's place with her one day. You know, they had one meeting. He brought her to see the sculptor room. You know.
Hmm. Wonderful.
Yeah.
So did he put her in the book like that because he liked her and then she turned him down? So in the book he writes it as he would have turned her down anyway? Because
Oh,
he subsequently becomes
Oh.
quite antagonistic about women in a certain way on page 335.
Mhm.
Yeah. But like, I don't know, you know, but basically Joyce was warned off. I can't remember the name of the guy. Rudolph something or other, Rudolph Hillpult or Pultilt, I just can't remember. But he just, you know, but she had been in the sanatorium and all this sort of thing. And, you know, there's a cynical view that he had the book written. You know, he had it written, and that's why he didn't need to see her again or to communicate. That he only did it for art.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of sanitize a lot of Joyce's behavior in Ireland, you know, as if he was a saint. You know, a saint for art's sake. Sort of.
Tortured her with letters in French and German.
I know, yeah.
And arranged a romantic meeting with her on the 2nd of February 1919.
That's right. He asked her to write to him in German because Nora couldn't read it.
Rudolf Hillpult, the man Martha Fleischman was living with, put an end to the affair.
Yeah.
But Joyce remained in loose contact with her even after leaving Zurich.
There you go.
Well, he just basically said, better back off
Yeah.
before I have to do something.
Well, I'd say Mrs. Joyce might have had a thing or two to say about it.
Sure she did.
Somehow, you know, I'd say she
Well,
called
we had that other thing though, where in Trieste,
yeah.
I mean, Joyce had to do that to an Italian fellow who was making advances on Nora,
That's right. Yeah.
where he had to have meeting with him and said, you better stop.
Yeah. So you see, the theory and the practice of these things apparently didn't always tie in.
Yeah.
So,
Great stuff.
I was going to say that, you know, I'm only throwing this in because the conversation is getting kind of a bit crazy anyway. But there are people who think I don't know if anyone else knows, but the bat is
The little bat.
the bat that you know the church bell rings, and the poor old bat was asleep, you see, in the belfry, and comes out because the bell is rung and gets into the novel. But the symbol in the medieval times of magic and so on, that the bat is actually the soul of Paddy Dignam returning, because it's only about 60 yards from Dignam's house. Or maybe a little bit more than that, and that the soul is the bat bringing the soul back at night time and saying thank you to Bloom for fixing up the insurance for the wife.
Fixing up the insurance. Yeah.
I mean, I have no idea, but I think it's fantastic. You know, fantastic theory. Anyway, you know, good fun.
The chapter. The
No,
chapter.
vets don't tell.
Bats
Little
don't
bats
tell.
don't tell.
Little bats
Yeah.
don't tell. And you see the chiasmus, you know, the people who you know, they cross over, that you have bloom and what is it? I have to get this right. I have to get the answer right. But the bat has sound but no sight. But Bloom and Gertie have sight, but they have no sound between them. You know, can you see this? And so you have this chiasmus that gets into your mind without any words at all.
Huh.
It's just in the telling. But
A,
it's
a
kinda-
quick note on bats. We're reading
Yeah.
Portrait, and Duncan, the chapter that we're reading now, I was reading it last night. There are two points at which, when he's discussing all these serious ethical, religious concepts, where he uses the exact same language almost, and the word bat-like is in it. A woman is reflecting bat-like about something, and he repeats it in two different places. And I won't
Wow.
bore you today with it, but it's funny
Wow.
we should talk about bat, because I've been circling in Portrait last night, all of these references to bats.
Ah, okay, that's great.
Yeah,
That's great.
yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I think the idea that all of Joyce's work is really one huge complex work,
Absolutely.
you know, where there are just crossovers happening all over, you know, from
Yeah.
Dubliners to Portrait to Ulysses to even Finnegan's Wake. And it's just, you know, we really are playing 4, 5, 6, 7-dimensional chess.
Hmm.
To
Yeah.
get a very bad analogy, but you know, because you suddenly realize it's something, just like Lois just pointed out.
Yeah.
We're talking about bats. Suddenly she refers us to bats in Portrait,
Mhm.
and then we begin to see that the bat it's a motif. It's probably got some specific function in all of this.
Yeah, that's that's what makes it so wonderful to keep reading it, because
Yeah.
every time you go through it, you find more stuff.
Mhm.
It's bottomless.
Mhm.
Yeah, bottomless, and I'm amazed. I don't know of anything else, any other art thing where I have laughed more at each additional reading.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, it tickles me more. It's like it's I find it more jokes in it, more delight in it,
Yeah.
more humanness in it.
And
Yeah.
and that phrase that he used, you know, I mean, you have to take all these things with a grain of salt. But Joyce said there's not a serious word in Ulysses.
Well, I think you have to relax into it. That's what Bill has always said. You have to
Yeah,
experience
yeah.
it. The first time around, it's like, what? You know,
What
what's
was
supposed
that?
to be happening? What am I missing? But this repeated readings are just so delightful for that reason. It gets richer and richer
Richer and richer.
and deeper.
Yeah.
And it makes
Mhm.
it, as I said before, it makes it hard to read contemporary novels.
Oh, it's not worth the effort.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I hate to say that. I mean, it sounds pretentious, but I really find, and I do try to keep up with reading what's being published to some extent,
Yeah.
and find it very disappointing.
Yeah, I share that experience. I tried last winter. I joined a library reading club. You know, reading a book a month, and I just got bored.
Yeah,
You know, and so I just sort of said, I'll go back to Joyce. You know,
yeah.
more fun there.
Huh, okay.
Yeah.
I do some contemporary reading now, but I tend to keep them very short. It's almost like I'm sampling.
Yeah.
And just trying to get the tone. You know, I mentioned that thing before. I think in a conversation with Joan that I have a big library. I'm not concerned about reading all the books in my library,
Yeah.
but they're more like, it's like my wine cellar.
Yes.
You know, I go and I sample things every once in a while just to get a little different flavor, little different perspective. And I'm doing, I tell you what, I'm doing a thing by the Israeli novelist Amos Oz, and I'm reading his biography, Tales of Love and Darkness. And I'm actually doing the audible version of it because the reader, there's a very good reader, and it is delightful. And it's got a lot of Joycean perspectives in it, in the sense that it's very human as he goes through his inventory of relatives and people he knew, and points out all their little foibles and uniquenesses, where they're rich, where they're just wacky as can be. And it holds my interest very strongly. Yeah. So if you want to try, some additional author, I would even though it's supposedly a nonfiction book, Tales of Love and Darkness is quite excellent in my humble opinion, and I have very humble opinions.
And how do you spell his surname?
Like the wizard.
It's Oz. Oz, like Wizard of Oz. O-Z.
Like the
Oh,
wizard.
as in Australia, Oz. Okay.
Yes,
there
I've
we
read one. I've read one of his novels, which was really terrific. So that's a good recommendation.
Yeah, after I go through Tales, I'm probably gonna try one of his novels and see how it does. But I without reservation, I can recommend Tales of Love and Darkness.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah.
I've got to a post-COVID point where I can barely read anything, except if I'm in a book club or the headlines of the newspaper or the occasional article.
Yeah.
So I've been reading Trust by Hernan Diaz, but I'll give you which won the Pulitzer last year. But what I recommend Netflix. I watched an awful lot of Netflix during COVID, and so I can tell you all about great series to watch.
Good.
I'm reading
Let's put those up the next day, Orla.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to know that. I need
I'm reading another Hernan Diaz, In the Distance. I'm in the middle of it right now, and it takes place in America, and I'm halfway through it. It's great.
Hernan Diaz.
Yeah, the accent is on the last syllable of Hernan, and the last name is Diaz, D-I-A-Z.
Okay.
And this one is In the Distance.
Okay. I can watch some YouTube videos. I occasionally can watch a movie, but my thing is audible books.
Yes.
A well-read. There are some incredibly good readers. There's a lot of bad readers too, and there is a disturbing trend where they're starting to use AI voices, and that is really horrible. But there's still a tremendous number of excellent readers reading very good material, and that's usually how I fall asleep at night. Is I put on a good audible book and just kind of stay along.
But then you have to find out where you fell asleep and why.
Yeah.
Well, that's true. And sometimes I listen to things probably 3 or 4 times, but I'm fine with that.
I do it with history podcasts, and I fall asleep and 100 years go by.
There you go. You're working in eternal time. All righty. Well, let's meet again next Thursday. And of course, those of you who joined for portrait, that we'll meet again on Monday. If you haven't tried, I think everybody here has been on portrait. The portrait readings have also been marvelous.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And any word on availability of Stephen Hero, Duncan? You were going to look into
Yeah.
that.
Well, I have found copies, and I found, once again, I will recommend, if you do any digital books at all, US money for $1.99, you can get everything. Probably misses a few little things, but I haven't found anything missing yet. All of Joyce, including his social and political essays and his letters, for $1.99.
On
And-
what?
That's through Amazon, or through yeah, that's through Amazon. I'll put a link in the James Joyce Readers Facebook page.
Right.
Put a
I-
link there, and I did check, and it does have a copy of Stephen Hero there.
Excellent.
I got my Stephen Hero.
Me too.
Oh,
€5 for £5 sterling. I got a beautiful copy from 1944.
Oh,
Library
Did-
copy of
recently,
Complete with the library. I
yeah.
bought
Yeah,
it.
you
recently, Joe.
Yeah, I got it last week.
stole it from the
And
library.
did you rob it
I
from the
got-
library?
No,
what size
it was last due in the library on the 30th of October 2006. I got it on Amazon.
Wow.
Obviously, the
Oh, very
library
good.
sold their stock, to a dealer. University of London, Goldsmiths
Yeah,
College.
yeah.
But it's, so
That's
it's
brilliant.
available. There was loads of them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
there
got one
are,
too.
there are quite a few
No
around.
problem.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
You got one
Okay.
too, no problem. Excellent.
Stop driving up the price for the rest of us.
No, I don't think.
This is like
Seven of us look-
Bloom's book that's overdue in the Capel Street Library. This one is 23 years overdue. What is it? 16 years overdue. It'll never be
Yeah.
back.
Yeah, no, I have, the used book market is fabulous. There's so many libraries dumping books.
Yeah.
That you can really find a lot of good quality, good condition books for pretty reasonable prices. So
I think of some of my books as being previously loved.
previous,
Yes.
yeah, okay, well, I'm gonna click the button and we're gonna meet
Okay.
again. in the very
Okay,
next-
see you guys.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Yeah, everybody.
Bye-bye.